Also joined by a young man who, from the very beginning of his time to come here, he was described by his governor as one of the brightest young men in Minnesota. Erik Paulsen is a young man who came to the United States Congress as a seasoned and experienced thought maker, but also as a person who understood the global implications of Minnesota, whether it be medical products and devices that are made or whether it be other agricultural products. And I'd like to yield, if I can, at this time to the gentleman from Minnesota, the gentleman from the Ways and Means. I yield to Mr. Paulsen at this time.
Well, I thank the chairman for yielding, and let me just thank the chairman for his leadership, not only in the Rules Committee, but for leading the bipartisan Free Trade Caucus and leading that effort, knowing and understanding the value of trade, the value of exports. And this is a very important issue, members. It's good to take time on the floor to talk about this because international trade, I will tell you, is a vital part of my economy. The chairman just alluded to that. Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District. Statewide in Minnesota, global trade supports almost 750,000 jobs in Minnesota. That's a pretty big number. And it's all about exports. It's about selling. We're 95% of the world's consumers living outside of the United States. And despite our successful economic relationships with a lot of countries around the world, we've had good agreements with Korea and Colombia and Panama, there's no doubt that a lot more can be done now. And that really begins with passing this bipartisan Congressional Trade Priorities Act, which will renew and update Trade Promotion Authority. And why is that important? It's important so we can move headway and get forward momentum on the TPP and the TTIP negotiations, because this ensures that we will accomplish several very, very important goals as a part of increasing transparency in trade negotiation and empowering Congress, empowering ourselves. This is why there's bipartisan support. It will specifically direct the administration to pursue congressional prerogatives through congressionally mandated negotiating objectives. It will establish very robust consultation and access to information requirements before, during, and after the negotiations. So we have a very open and transparent process with all members of Congress and the public. And also, more importantly, it preserves the congressional prerogatives that are there, giving Congress the ability to vote and giving final approval to any trade agreements through procedures and providing an up or down vote. And that's really critical. Our trading partners are certainly looking for that authority to move forward. And so I want to commend the chairman who's had a role in that legislation, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, as well as in the Senate with bipartisan support, making sure that the administration will be negotiating a deal that covers the issues that are most important in today's economy. And the reason that's important, Mr. Speaker and others, is because this is not simply about focusing on tariffs. We always know that trade negotiations and agreements focus on tariffs, but this is about import quotas and other non-traditional barriers to trade, because the regular traditional barriers are no longer enough. This is about finding 21st century solutions to streamline trade and end these non-tariff barriers so we can interconnect regulations across our borders, reduce foreign regulatory barriers to our exports. And you've got the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which of course my colleague from South Dakota spoke so eloquently on, where we've got 11 countries participating with emerging markets. But the area of negotiation that I'm most interested in right now is TTIP, with the Transatlantic Investment Partnership with our Atlantic friends. And this is one of those opportunities, I think, as co-chair of the TTIP caucus, along with Congressman Neal and Keating and Young, wanting to make sure that on the ongoing negotiations are going to move forward, because the transatlantic economy is our largest in the world. It's the most integrated in the world. It's 50% of the world's GDP. It's generating about $5 trillion in total commercial sales each year, 30% of global trade. Mr. Speaker, those are big numbers as well. And we've known for years that a trade agreement between the United States and the European Union is the right thing to do. I remember back in the summer of 2012, I authored a bipartisan letter with 50 different members of Congress bipartisanly supporting such an agreement. And then last year we had the launch of the Business Coalition for Transatlantic Trade. We had a chance to meet with our Ways and Means counterparts, introduce the resolution calling for swift action on TTIP. And then earlier, as I mentioned earlier this month, we launched that TTIP caucus, which is a chance to move forward, I think, significantly. Because I'll tell you what it means to Minnesota. $4.5 billion in Minnesota goods are purchased by European countries right now. 42,200 Minnesota jobs are supported by European investment annually. And if we pass TTIP, it's estimated another 3,000 jobs are going to come on hand. This is about higher wages, healthier economy, and that direct investment is absolutely going to be helping us right here at home. So these TTIP negotiations present a huge opportunity to tackle these non-tariff barriers, as I mentioned earlier, such as regulations that will needlessly impact and increase the cost of trade between the U.S. and Europe right now. But you know, everyone knows getting to this agreement is not going to be easy. There are some real differences between our economies and our continents, such as the way we approach regulation. But all indications are, it seems, and I think the chairman would agree, that the negotiators are moving full ahead. They want to continue to make progress towards a final agreement. The next round of negotiation, it's actually set to take place this next month. And so we can't get there unless we pass the TPA authority. So passing this bipartisan Congressional Trade Priorities Act is going to make sure we're protecting intellectual property, we're setting high standards. Other countries around the world are going to have to be forced to look at what the United States and the EU are doing, and then we can make sure the bad actors are following our lead by setting those high standards. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I just want to commend you for hosting the time today, and I want to thank the chairman again for the opportunity to discuss trade and the bipartisan Congressional Trade Priorities Act, and the importance of trade to both of our states and the entire country. I know it is important in Minnesota and my economy back home. I'd be happy to yield back.
Mr. Paulsen, I want you to stick around for just another minute because I really want to engage you in speaking about exactly what you just said. We know TPA. TPA is that process, Trade Promotion Authority, whereby Congress gives authority to the President of the United States, and then once that is done, the President, through the ambassador, the trade ambassador, goes and they go to the world, and there are two different processes which are started now, one in Asia and one essentially that is in Europe. And these really offer America a chance to become a better and bigger player in the world and to even get a better deal in working so that the consumers of the world get a better opportunity. Is that really the way you see this working?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you just pretty much laid it out. That's the way we do see this working. I mean, this is a win-win for the opportunities for our companies to engage in a healthier economy and employ more people, but also for consumers to benefit. On the other side, I mean, I know that without a doubt, South Korea, Panama, Colombia were significant trade agreements, and they have been languishing on the sidelines for a long period of time. And with bipartisan support, we were able to pass them all. Now we've got a chance to show and prove that America is back on the playing field. We know the benefits of trade. I know when I had a chance to visit South Korea, they spoke about the Costco in South Korea and their interest in selling American goods and how that was the #1 Costco in the world, essentially, after the free trade agreement, because they want to buy American. This is about exporting, creates more jobs at home, keeps the innovation here at home, and sells where the customers are. And so we can't get to these agreements, though, unless we get this Trade Promotion Authority, which makes sure every member of Congress is going to have a hand in seeing the negotiation process forward to the tune where we've not had that type of involvement among individual members of Congress in the past. This is very important, I think, for Congress to exercise its congressional prerogative and at the same time work in partnership with the administration, moving some very important initiatives forward.
You know, continuing our dialogue here, and I appreciate the gentleman taking time to do this, but American-made products, whether they be manufacturing, whether they be medical instruments, whether they be pharmaceuticals, they all have to go through a really pretty stringent viewpoint from a perspective of regulators who look at things that we have in our marketplace, certainly that travel across state lines, but once these products and services are made available and become generally available in the United States and people learn how to use them, we create a thirst for the rest of the world to be able to buy our products. And there's a figure that we deal with, and I know the gentleman is a strong supporter of our trade working group, but essentially 38% of what we manufacture and build, our output here in the United States, is something that gets into a trading partnership one way or another. Almost 40% of the output of the United States is based one way or another off trade, us making sure the rest of the world gets a chance to get those products also, which lowers prices in our country on a per unit basis, perhaps more importantly, keeps our jobs here in the United States. That's got to be good for somebody from Minnesota.
Yeah, and I should just mention here is that the first trade agreement that really dealt with the opportunity to negotiate on medical devices specifically was the Korea free trade agreement that recently passed. And medical devices is kind of near and dear to my heart because it's so prevalent in Minnesota. We have one of the strongest ecosystems in the medical device community in the country, in fact, in the world. And these are high-valued manufactured products that are improving lives, that are saving lives. And there's a regulatory scheme that's often surrounding, of course, making sure these devices are approved and before they move forward. Well, we have the opportunity, and I think now, Mr. Chairman, with some of these trade agreements that are moving forward, to not only negotiate the tariffs and making sure that these manufactured products are going to be available to others around the world, and also lowering costs for our consumers, but also the regulatory environment can be set up in a way that if we have oversight committees, for instance, in the EU and in the United States, and we've got a device that's on track to be approved, say, by the FDA in the United States, we can make sure that if our oversight committees agree on the other side of the continent, on the other side of the Atlantic, that they can sign off on it. And so you save a tremendous amount of time in moving forward and having those goods be available pretty quickly to a lot of consumers around the world. And that's going to help, again, the economy, it's going to grow jobs, and it's going to help patient care around the world. So that's one area in particular that Minnesota will and has benefited.
Continuing our dialogue, the gentleman sits on this awesome and most powerful committee here, the Ways and Means Committee. And the committee on a regular basis hears from people in the United States who do a lot of business overseas. And one of the things which they talk about is intellectual property, rule of law, and following contracts to make sure that what you agreed to equally is agreed to by the others. Do you mind taking just a minute and talking with us tonight about the importance of intellectual property, how the world can capture this idea, and how it can, in fact, increase not only value of products, but to make sure that the product which is actually bought and sold is the real product that's and the company that stands behind it. Do you mind talking about that for a minute?
You know, this is an area I think where the United States really stands out and shines. And if anything, we are known for our innovation. It is really part of our DNA in terms of having a patent system that protects intellectual property, the rule of law, and there are many other countries around the world that don't have those same standards. And that's where the benefit of trade agreements can help bring in high standard agreements so that other countries can have to be forced to follow these agreements. And look, intellectual property, that protects the ideas, that protects the innovation, that protects the invention, the dreamers that are coming up with all of these ideas. And that's critical. And look, there are some countries that are lagging behind. We've had frustrations, I know, recently with China where they've targeted U.S. information technology. They've targeted renewable energy. They've targeted biopharmaceuticals and other products for the express purpose of creating local production opportunities for Indian companies, for instance. And that's a violation of intellectual property in many respects. And having these trade negotiations is going to ensure that we can keep that conversation moving forward for having those high standards. And that's going to protect our jobs here at home for the dreamers, the thinkers, and the folks that create and innovate these new ideas and these new products. And so when you've got unfair and you've got harmful products that are practices that are happening in other countries, so maybe it's India, maybe it's China, that's ultimately going to damage the long-term health of the economic health of both of our economies when we're having that type of a situation.
I guess lastly what I'd like to do is engage the gentleman on a broader perspective, and that is really the idea of American exceptionalism, how we have the greatest military in the world, our United States military, men and women working together all around the globe to make sure that really there's fairness and that our friends and neighbors and allies have an opportunity to live in a free world. But as part of this process, American exceptionalism, to where we are able to go and compete anywhere with our goods and products and services and to let the world have that advantage. Would you mind taking just a second and speaking specifically about American exceptionalism?
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think what you're alluding to is the fact that America can compete and win at any level if we're on a level playing field. If the rules are even, if the rules of the game are set the same, Americans can compete and win. And that's going to help improve our economy, help grow jobs here at home. And, you know, in terms of American exceptionalism, there's no doubt that you know, when you've got a free flow of goods going across borders, it's going to help our foreign policy. It's going to help us lead from a position of strength, and it's also going to make. There's someone who famously said at one time, if goods aren't crossing borders, guns will. And so having that trade connection is very, very important. It helps us have diplomatic conversations. It helps us as America lead the rest of the world, showing that we're strong, we're leading out front. And again, with you got two pretty significant trade agreement opportunities being negotiated right now, coming close to conclusion, I think we can wrap those up within the year if we pass trade promotional authority, both in the Trans-Pacific Partnership and with the TTIP negotiations going on in Europe. And that will cover, by and large, you know, 2/3 of the economy of the world, and all the other countries will follow our lead. And this is a huge opportunity, as the chairman knows, for our companies and our economy back home.
Well, I'm just most impressed with not only your thoughtful consideration and your hard work, but really the things which I see that you bring to the table are words and ideas on a regular basis. And that is, you talk about we need to make sure that we have a stable environment where good decisions can be made instead of in a vacuum. They can be made on the fly. And secondly, growth. And one of the things which I read on a regular basis, a young man named Peter Roth, who is with U.S. News and World Report, and he talks about how growth is important. You have to grow your economy. You have to go and continue in the hunt, so to speak, to make sure that more and more people not only buy your products, but the next generation of those products come out also. And I want to thank the gentleman for his thoughtful leadership, where you come to the meetings and you have a real thoughtful handle on stability, making sure business knows what the rules are, making sure we build great neighbors and have good contracts and great relationships, and then the generation and the next generation of goods and services where we can make things even better for the next generation.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for being here tonight, and thank you. I know that you're going to want to get back to the office and call your family and tell them the exciting special order that you were a part of tonight. I'm sure your wife will be very, very excited about